All right guys, out testing the Pioneer 500 with my shock conversion, and I've just done a little power line rip here, and I can tell you that it is about twice as comfortable as stock. Now I know that is very subjective, but the amount of dampening and the amount of travel we have now is insane. So the front end is sitting slightly lower than I had it before because it actually has some sag. The spring rate isn't ridiculously stiff like with the factory shocks, but the rear I've got cranked up a lot more. So I've got a lot more clearance in the rear, but I've still got more down travel because I unlocked a bunch of travel that just wasn't being used. It feels awesome. I mean, it's not, I'm not going to say it's like, you know, an X3 or something like that, but it's probably comparable with Pioneer 1000 now with these shocks. Big time improvement in ride quality. Definitely feels a lot more, sporty because you can actually hit a bump without even like slowing down thinking, oh, that's going to hurt. So I'll get some footage romping it around. Hopefully you can tell how it looks from the camera, you know, as far as stiffness and stuff. But man, I think this is a great mod. A lot more ground clearance and a lot more ride quality. We're going to also try to find somewhere to flex it out to see if we can actually get some suspension flex. That'd be the first ever, right? A Pioneer 500 without a long arm kit that has some flex would be pretty awesome. Like my first take at this mod, putting these shocks on here, moving the arms forward, and you know, as I do them more and more, I'll get them a little more, get the design cleaned up a little bit, use a little thicker metal, stuff like that. But I think it's going to work great. This is a pretty light side-by-side, and now that it's got some actual damping and some proper bump stops, the nice soft rubber bump stops, the shock mounts aren't going to take nearly as much abuse. Also, my shocks aren't leaking, right? I sprayed oil on them to make the adjusters work nice. So yeah, let's go romp it around and see what's what. I do want to crank up the preload on the front one more notch because it is kind of sagging in the front compared to the rear. But man, it's riding super nice. Yeah, I do have another notch of preload I can do up front. All right, we did finally get some rain, but it's gonna be a pretty short rip because I forgot to put gas in it. Oh my gosh, it is so much more comfortable. I don't think I bottomed it out yet. It sounds good, no bad noises so far, which is kind of impressive. Let's drop in this big hole right here. I also have the winch hooked up so we can get stuck as long as we're 50 feet from a telephone pole or a tree. You can actually hear the shocks doing some work. Let me try to get some video for you. So I'm taking this trail twice as fast as I usually do because it actually has some suspension now. Oh my gosh, Honda did this thing a huge disservice with those cheap little shocks. All right, the mud is back. All right, to demonstrate what's going on here, we have the Pioneer up on the ramp, about to fall off and kill me, but it's flexed out. Now, if you don't believe me, look at this shock. It's got about, you know, 1.5 inches up to the bump stop, and this shock, it's got the full 4 inches. So it actually has flex now, which is something most Pioneers cannot say unless you do the long travel kit, and which is quite expensive, and you put some much longer shocks. Look at that rear flex. It's actually very decent. So that's about 1 inch from the bump stop, and that's about 4 inches. So that's awesome, man. We've got a decent amount of suspension flex. That's gonna make more traction. Right now, all 4 tires are still on the ground, you know, with good weight on them. Anything weird's happening? I don't see any signs of anything moving yet. Front and in the rear. What do we got? Everything looks good, dude. There's a lot of weld on there. I really do think they're going to be just fine. Speed run. Obviously, my speedometer is not accurate because of the gear reduction and the speedo correction module. But we will get out our GPS speedometer because that is a pretty good truth source. So we got the old speedometer app going there. See how this thing doesn't auto downshift? I love that. So as you saw, my speedometer reads way low, but we achieved a max speed of 30 miles per hour off-road in a Pioneer 500. I would say it's geared about perfect with that 35% reduction. Wow, I would have never taken that fast before. Sway bar, the body lean isn't bad because it's so slow regardless, so that's not a big deal. Let's go ahead and put it in four-wheel drive here, cross this crap, put it into low gear, aka first. Oh, she's got the torque. It definitely takes longer to shift in and out of four-wheel drive, mostly out once you add the locker. There's more bind on the drivetrain. One thing I like to check after a romp like that is how warm the shocks are. You can hold your hand on it, but that shock is warm. Ooh, that sucker's hot. So the back shock's doing a lot more work than the front shock. So how warm the shock gets tells you how much energy it's dissipating, aka how much dampening it's doing, right? That tells you how much the fluid inside the shock is being worked. So the fact that they're warm is good. We're using all the travel. The shaft is nice and shiny. And I was really just ripping on it pretty hard back and forth. So I am very happy with this mod. Huge improvement in ride quality, not to mention ground clearance and articulation. It's a win, win, win.